Welcome to the Circuit of Success Podcast.
The Circuit of Success Podcast.
With your host,
Brett Gilliland.
Brett Gilliland, Visionary Wealth Advisory.
The Circuit of Success Podcast. Let's start the show.
Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I'm your host, Brett Gilliland, and today I've got Dr. Kelvin Adams with me. Kelvin, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here today. A little rainy day we've got today. It's pouring.
Yeah, I think people were looking for the rain, so they got it.
Got it.
Maybe more than they wanted. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think it's going to be raining all week.
All week, which is fantastic. My wife likes the rain. She takes her to outside yard, so she's happy today.
That's awesome. Helps our farmers in the area, the garden growers, whatever, right? So, yes. Well, I was introduced to you by Bill Schmidt. Mm-hmm. We had lunch not too long ago, and after that lunch, I mean, I got to have this guy on the podcast, and you're doing great things, have done great things, and continue to do great things. And so, former superintendent of St. Louis Public Schools, and had a great run there, and now the president and CEO of the St. Louis Community Foundation. But before we dive into all that stuff, if you could, just give us a little lay of the land and what's made you the man that you are today.
I am a faith man, and so I believe that to whom much is given, much is required, and I live my life that way. I live my life that I am working really hard to make sure that I'm supporting anyone in my space and anyone outside of my space, quite frankly. I just think I've been blessed, and so my whole being is about making sure that I'm giving back in my personal life and my professional life. And that's the real purpose of why I live. And it has worked for me for the last 68 years. And I hope that it will continue to do so.
Absolutely. Well, we got a new friend here. How are we doing?
Hey, how are you?
I was like, who's coming in? Also got to have lunch with Josina as well, didn't we? How are you doing?
Doing great.
Awesome. Well, so that's great. And so you grew up in the New Orleans area, correct?
Grew up in the Lower Ninth Ward in New Orleans. Lower Ninth Ward because it's designated as a really rough area of the city. And being taken care of by my grandparents. My father was alcoholic. My mother was a paranoid schizophrenic. And so they had other issues going on in their lives. And so my younger brother and myself were reared by my grandparents, who quite frankly gave me the kind of faith that I need to have to kind of overcome the kind of challenges that I have dealt with as a kid and obviously growing up as well. So, yes, growing up in New Orleans, Louisiana, all of my life, quite frankly.
Yeah. So what was it like growing up there where you grew up? What was some stuff that you dealt with that obviously you don't want to deal with?
I think the challenges of poverty create this notion of lacking. Whether that's lacking self-esteem, lacking resources. And so I grew up believing that maybe I was less than the people around me. And quite frankly, schools gave me the belief that I wasn't lacking.
Yeah.
I had great teachers, great principals. And then I attached to this thing called basketball. And I had some great coaches who really spoke to my life and gave me what I needed to have in terms of self-esteem. And I equate basketball as putting me where I am today because I worked really, really hard. Everybody was equal on the court. It's really about producing, and there was no favoritism. And so I would say I dealt with the kind of things that you would talk to anybody living in poverty that they dealt with.
Yeah.
And nothing special about those things, just the fact that I had to overcome some things that were not necessarily the right kinds of things that you need to overcome.
Yeah. Well, I'm always fascinated by this, that people can grow up in an area like that you grew up and you've made something of yourself, right? And there's some people that grew up there that didn't make something of themselves. But then on the flip side, there's people that grew up maybe with wealth, made something of themselves, grew up in wealth, and they didn't make something of themselves, right? So there's kind of those four areas you can look at. What do you think it was for you that helped you become successful despite maybe what you grew up with?
I think for me, and I'm like you, I have friends that are no longer living. I have friends that did well, and I have friends that are in the same places they were 6 to 8 years ago, quite frankly. I think for me, it was this notion that that I could do better, that whatever the challenges were, that there was something special about me. And I don't know what that is. I don't know what it was, but I always felt I was different. I always felt that I was given something different. That's why I said, to whom much is given, much is required. And so I thought I was always different, no matter what was going on. Yes, somebody could do this. Yes, somebody could do that. Yes, they got in trouble with this, but that wasn't happening to me that way. I didn't get pulled in or sucked into those things. And I keep asking myself, why? Why didn't I smoke weed? Why didn't I carry a weapon? Why didn't I do all of those kinds of things? I didn't do all those kinds of things because I felt that to whom much was given, much is required, that I had something that I needed to accomplish. And that always kept me on the straight and narrow. I guess I was afraid to do some of those kinds of things because of what my grandparents had given to me. The fear, a little bit of fear of them, but a great fear in what could have happened if I did those kinds of things.
Yeah. So you made the comment, in my family, my wife and I, we love that saying, to whom, and from Bible, right? Too much,
yes.
Much is given, much is required. But sometimes people say much is expected, right? And so what do you think of the difference between those two words, expected versus required?
I think expected is some level of obligation that you have. You expected to do more. I thought I was required to do it. I mean, I thought I had an obligation to do it. I think the expectation piece is that there is some other persons who are on the outside expecting you to do some things, that extra pressure, if you will. I thought it was internal for me. I am required to do some things. I have to give back. I have no option. I have no option not to give back. The expectation is somebody's telling you you have. It's kind of like somebody on the outside looking in, and required is inside looking out. Yeah. I have to do these things. Yeah. I'm just required. If I don't, then I don't survive. I can't continue to move forward. Yeah,
it's funny because I think the exact same thing. The expectation is that there's a way out.
Right.
There's a plan B.
That's right. That's right.
I don't have a plan B. If it's required, there's no plan B.
That's exactly right. I am required to do some things that others probably were not required to do.
So talk to us about your tenure at the Superintendent for St. Louis Public Schools. I saw a stat that you took the graduation rates from 54% to over 80%. Talk to us about that, and man, I mean, that's amazing.
So I arrived as superintendent in 2008 from New Orleans. I was recruited, if you will, and I applied for the position. A lady by the name of Maxine Clark. I'll give her the credential, the credence, if you will.
I'm going to be with her in a couple of weeks. She's doing the podcast.
Fantastic lady. She called me on the phone. Didn't know her from Adam, and said, hey, I heard about you in New Orleans, and I'd like to know if you would like to come back to be the superintendent of St. Louis Public Schools. And I said, who are you, first of all? I'd heard about her because I was in St. Louis for a period of time, about 10, 11 months, went back to New Orleans, worked with a guy named Paul Vallis to kind of put the district together after Hurricane Katrina. And she called me at the Clear Blue. One thing led to another. I applied, and I became superintendent. And so what I found was a district that obviously had a lot of challenges, financial challenges, $66 million deficit, academic achievement wasn't where it needed to be, and the board governance was all over the place. And so obviously graduation is one of the things that you measure yourself by. And I looked at the data around how many kids were coming to school and graduating some 12 years later. And we started to put a plan together to try to address graduation rate. And it is true that it did increase, but it wasn't something that I did. It was really a plan that everybody participated in. And it was just one of the small measures, if you will, to kind of determine how districts do. And we were able to move that needle over a 14-year period of time to a place where the district was fully accredited. I left the district with about $150 million surplus. And obviously the governance structure was in a whole lot better shape when we left than when I arrived. But it was a team effort around a strategic board, 3 strong board members, Rick Sullivan, Richard Gaines, and Melanie Adams, and then followed by the Donetta Klinscale, where 4 board members had been appointed from a outside structure, if you will, before elected board came back. In my last 3 years, I worked with the elected board. So, some achievement there, a lot of work still to be done in these kinds of districts, but it was a team effort.
Is he that humble every day? I mean, he just shows up like, 66 million deficit, $150 million of, it's like, how does that happen? Like, what was some of the biggest steps that you took to make that happen?
Yeah, first of all, we, everything in the school district is about staffing. 80% of the cost. 75% to 80% is about staffing. So we would look really closely at our staffing model and what we were doing. And so we cut back on some things we need to cut back on. I'm incredibly frugal. Anybody who knows me knows that. Some would say I squeak when I walk, but at the end of the day, it's about revenue out. I mean, it's about expenditures out and revenue coming in.
That's right.
And so we were able to navigate those two areas in a really big way over time. It didn't happen year one or year two, year three. 5 million here, 10 million here. We had a surplus every single year with the exception of one, a balanced budget every year with the exception of one. And we just made some adjustments. We closed 21 schools. We cut back on a number of things that we had. We renegotiated contracts. We just did all of the kinds of things that you need to do. We took furlough days and at the time when we needed to do so, including myself as superintendent. So I tried to set the example that we just need to get out of debt. I think debt is a curse, if you will. It pulls you down.
Yeah.
And I think on a personal level it does, and I think from a business perspective it does the same thing. So long story short is we just did the kinds of things that businesses do on a regular basis. Yeah. Businesses want to survive, and they make the kind of cuts and adjustments. The only thing we couldn't do is we couldn't increase our revenue. That revenue was fixed by the state and by local dollars, although we did go to voters on 2 occasions to get a bond passed to improve our buildings and another occasion to raise salaries for employees. So we were able to build a kind of confidence in the community that they were willing to a tune of about 78 to 80% to vote favorable for 2 taxes that had never been done in almost 20 years, if you will.
And people love their taxes.
Yeah, they do. But we were able to convince them that it was about kids and it was about supporting the right kinds of things. Plus, we had a record of doing the right kinds of things. Yeah. So it was easier for people to say yes.
Yeah, that's great. Congratulations on that. That's a really, really big deal. How did you as a leader, and we'll talk about the St. Louis Community Foundation here soon, but as a leader, how did you create a culture of caring, but also maybe challenge?
So I believe in servant leadership. That means that it is my responsibility to serve the community, which meant that I was doing for them as opposed to them doing for me. And so I hired staff people who had that same mindset. I worked with my staff to develop that mindset. So when I arrived, there were about 80 principals. In my first year, we removed we gave about 80% of them different options to look at, who did not necessarily have that mindset or were looking toward retiring and other kinds of things. I think it matters that you have the right people on the bus.
That's right.
To know exactly where you're going. And I started building a team that thought about those kinds of things, that they thought it was their obligation to provide resources and information to the community, to students and their parents. And so we had a servant mindset. It was about servant leadership. Anybody on my team knows I talked about that every single day, and I tried to walk in that light as well to make sure that people were not serving me, that I was serving them.
How do you handle bad news or challenges?
It's difficult when it's about kids. And so I struggled with my tenure in terms of losing kids. I lost 171 kids from the time I started as superintendent to the time I walked away, December 2022. I could almost remember every name of the kids or funerals I went to. It's very difficult when it's on a kid basis. You take it personally. You take it internally. Outside of that, nothing else is important.
Yeah.
Literally, nothing else is important. If kids are not getting injured in any way, shape, or form on a bus accident, you just deal with it. It's about, it's going to happen. Bad stuff is going to happen. There's nothing you can do about it. The scripture talks about the poor will always be with you. That is a fact. In an analogy of that, bad stuff is going to happen. It's how you address it and deal with it. It's really not about the bad stuff. It's about your response to it. As I said before, the hardest piece for me was losing kids. Getting a call on a Sunday night, a kid shot in the neighborhood, or a kid getting 2 or 3 kids getting killed in a car accident or a fire occurring, a kid dying of cancer, mostly African American boys. Those were the numbers. But that was the hard piece for me. You never walk away from those kinds of things because parents only have one child, and that they think about it as that one child, and losing that kid, you never get back. But everything else you deal with. Everything else you frame it the right way. I have the ability to put things in boxes, and that box of that tragedy or a deficit or whatever the case may be, I put in that box and then I move forward. The hardest thing to put in boxes is the death of kids.
Yeah, for sure. It's amazing. I mean, it tells you the man you are. You know the number, say most of their names. I mean, it means something to you, right?
It does.
It's really neat. What risk are you happy? You look at back at your career. What risk are you happy that you've taken?
The risk that I'm happy that I've taken, number one, the risk to move from New Orleans to St. Louis, to try something different, to move in a different place. The risk to trust people that others said I should never trust. And there's several in that space. We all get warnings, I don't think you need to talk to that person. The risk to do that. The risk to look at things differently, to see things that other people don't see. There are always risks. We tell people those are not the kind of partnerships. I had been advised when I arrived in St. Louis that charter schools were bad, that I should never collaborate and have partnerships with charter schools. That was a risk not to trust some political structures that were in place of people who were in those seats. And I took the risk to extend myself in ways that others probably would not have, because they were really cautious and, dotting the I's and crossing the T's. I am cautious as well, but it's about being smart. It's about being astute. It's about listening with your spirit, man, as opposed to your ears. So for me, the risk to move here, the risk to develop partnerships that I was told not to develop, and frankly, the risk to believe in kids that others felt could not achieve. The 50% to 80% people told me it would never happen. Oh, you can't fix this district. Are you crazy? Why are you here? As a matter of fact, when I arrived, there were 3 people that they told me I had not spoken to. And so I made an appointment to speak to those 3 people. And 2 of the 3 people wondered why I came. They said, you shouldn't have been superintendent. You've never been a superintendent before. You've never done this before. And I listened to them. I said, well, I'm really sorry you feel that way. And we'll see what happens,
Hide and watch.
And 14 years later, those people have said, we're glad you came.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. What do you, when you guys stay a student of the game, right? You guys stay on top of your game no matter what you're doing in life. And so what was that process like for you to always be the best?
The process for me was, I did a lot of reading. I don't like going out of town and doing those kind of conferences kind of stuff. So I didn't necessarily do those kinds of things. I connected myself with other superintendents who were in similar kind of districts that I was in, and developed some collaboration or partnerships with them. It wasn't intentional. It's kind of like we were all in the same boat. And so how do we swim out of this boat? And so I watched what some of them did nationally. I did a lot of reading around and stayed abreast of the current research around things that were going on. And I stayed hungry. There was always something I wanted to get done. Even when we got full accreditation and moved back out of debt and those kinds of things, there was still some things I wanted to get accomplished until I finally woke up one day and said, I think it's time, to move on. But I always was looking at a bigger picture. I wasn't satisfied with status quo. I was always pushing people outside of the box, outside of the tent, to look, we can do better. Yeah, this is okay, but we could do better.
Yeah. So let's turn the page now and let's talk about the St. Louis Community Foundation, which is what we had lunch about. But talk to us about that. Why does that mean so much to you? Why does it mean so much to you that you go home and after your retirement and you tell your wife you're going back to work? I mean, come on.
She probably told me it's time for you to go back to work. If you know my wife. So honestly, I was not even thinking about the St. Louis Community Foundation. It wasn't on my radar. I had gone back to work at Harrisville University as the associate dean and distinguished professor at that university, and I thought I was going to give back by working in that institution that has some challenges, and I thought I can add some knowledge, if you will, some support to what they were doing. A friend of mine reached out to me and said, "Hey, somebody wants to meet with you to talk about the St. Louis Community." Well, I didn't even remember it was the St. Louis Community Foundation, to talk to you about recommending some people for a position. And I said, okay. And so about a month later, we finally got together and we're sitting down at Panera and Brentwood. And a person sits down. I say, "Hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you." And he said, "Well, let me ask you first before I ask you about people who might be up for this role. What do you think about you applying to be the CEO, president of the St. Louis Community Foundation?" And the guy who I came with said, "Oh, he will never do that. He just retired." And I said, "Wait, stop. Tell me more." And so one thing led to another, and started having some conversations with him. And I applied for the position, interviewed, and they called me 5 minutes after I interviewed and said, "Are you interested in the job?"
Wow.
And I said, "I need to go back and talk to my wife." And she said, "Yeah, please go, please." So that's kind of how it happened. To be honest with you, almost every job that I've taken, the last 4 jobs, somebody's called and asked me about something, and I was never interested in that position. I was never interested in being superintendent of St. Louis Public Schools. I was never interested in going to Harrisville. I never was interested in the St. Louis Community Foundation. And so I believe that's how God kind of frames things for me, puts me in that kind of position. And so that's how it happened. But I wasn't interested. I became interested because it gives me an opportunity now, at least when I thought about it, and it still does, to give back. I was on the other side of the table as superintendent, having meetings with persons who are philanthropically minded, asking them to give resources to us to address the kind of challenges that a high poverty district like St. Louis Public School had. So it was on the other side of the table. And now I was talking to potential donors who could give back, allow me, if you will, to manage their resources in a way to give back. So two totally different places. One of asking based on lack, one of giving based on excess, if you will. And so it was just a great opportunity. And I am super happy I do it every single day. It is a blessing on top of a blessing. And somebody sent me an email last week asking me a year later how I felt about the work. I said I'm excited about the work.
Yeah,
I really am excited about it.
That's a big deal. Tell our listeners who maybe not know what the St. Louis Community Foundation is. What is it? How do they get involved, and who are you helping?
The St. Louis Community Foundation was formed in 1915, the second oldest community foundation in the country, next to Cleveland, Ohio. And its purpose is purposeful philanthropy. I call it double P's. Somebody told me not to say what I was going to say. But anyway, it is structured in a way that donors come to us, ask us to manage their dollars such that they can give out those dollars to 501c3 normally to impact the community. We manage about 900 accounts with about $500 million, and we give out about $100 million a year. Wow. Those are the big pictures. We've averaged about $100 million over the last 5 years. Last year was about $86 million. But donors kind of direct where those dollars go. We're changing the model, if you will, and that new model is for us to be much more aligned to some strategic focuses in our area. For me, those two for our foundation, the two strategic focuses are economic mobility and youth connections. On the area of economic mobility, it's about housing, it's about job access, and it's about financial wealth, if you will, or wealth management. So we want to encourage our donors and use some of our discretionary dollars to support those 3 areas. Why those areas? Because on the economic mobility side, because we believe if we impact these areas in our community, we could see some long-term impact. On the other side, on the youth connection side, it's really about educational innovation. I talked about the challenges of 171 kids losing their lives, but if principals and administrators can be innovative, they could address some of those issues, and we want to have dollars to support that. The other two areas under youth connections would be early child education. I think everybody understands that early child education is critical and important. If you can impact kids in 0 to 3, then you don't have to deal with all of the kind of tutoring dollars and dollars you have to put in place to address the issues that are happening wrong to them, if you will. And the other one is scholarships. We gave out $1.9 million last year in scholarship dollars. We want to increase that because we know that if you can get a quality education, i.e. Kelvin Adams, getting a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD, then it can really change the dynamic. And you go from a person who is in poverty to a person with resources and then willing to give back. So that education piece is critical and important. And we're not just talking about 4-year colleges. We're talking about 2-year community colleges as well as job training, career training, because plumbers, quite frankly, make more than some teachers make, no ifs and buts about it. So those are the two areas. That's why they're important. But that's what the foundation does. The foundation is focusing on trying to do that holistically, from what a donor wants to do, and then from our own interests based on the board approving our strategic priorities and looking at those 6 areas under them. We want to try to really make a difference in this community. The last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up as it relates to this, is we are now also partnering with other foundations doing the same kind of thing, looking at those same priorities. I could name some, but I don't want to do that. But we have collectively gotten together over the last, I guess, 6 to 8 months that I've been in place by somebody else providing some leadership to say, okay, St. Louis Community Foundation, we can give $1 million to this. This other foundation can give another $1 million. This other foundation can give another $1 million. Somebody else might give 5. That's now $8 million addressing a big issue in our community as opposed to just our $1 million. $1 million sounds like a lot, but it's not a lot when you're dealing with the kind of challenges that we address in our community.
Yeah. That's amazing. What a great story. And we will put this in the show notes too, and the website and all the links that we can give to people can give back and get involved, right? That's what it takes. It takes time and talent and treasures. And you guys are doing amazing things here in St. Louis. So we're thankful for that. What's your purpose? Why do you think God put you on this earth?
I think at the end of the day, it's to be an example and a role model. I think that's what it's really about. We all have made some tremendous mistakes. I'm sure if I asked you, you would say the same thing. Things that you will look back on and go, wow, I wish I hadn't done that. There are a ton of them in my life. But despite all of those kinds of things, I've tried to be a role model, and I've tried to make a difference in our community, in the communities that I've been engaged in. So I think his purpose for me is to continue to do that.
Yeah. So I see you got your tie on today. I saw a video though that I've seen you in a bow tie quite a bit.
Yes,
and I saw this video. You probably know what I'm talking about. This young man, I think, started making bow ties.
Yes.
And then you started to wear the bow ties.
Yes.
But in that clip, I saw it said, I think the kid said, you said, dress for the job you want, not for the one you have.
That's right.
So tell us about that.
I have always believed, and this is old school, so I know the millennial and the X don't probably believe in this, but I think people know who you are when you walk in the door. And so how you dress says that about how you feel about yourself and how you want them to feel about you. Yeah. So I always try to go places and look decent, if you will, and look like, not that I'm important, but that I am somebody, that I am different. I talked about this difference piece. I always try to wear a tie. When I was a superintendent, when I was a teacher in the classroom, when I was a principal, I always wore a tie because I wanted kids to see me as a role model. And growing up in the kind of neighborhoods that I grew up in, and also the schools that I worked in, I always worked in tough schools. I wanted kids to look at me and say, hey, I want to be like that person, or he respects himself enough to come like that. I didn't want to wear jeans. I didn't want to wear tennis shoes. I wanted to dress in a way, and that's me. That's not how everybody else looks at things, but that's how I looked at it, and that's what I try to convey. And that kid is 100% correct. That's what I try to convey.
Yeah, love that. Dress for the job you want, not for the job that you have. When you think about the process that you went through for the accreditation, I kind of wanted to end towards that because I'm assuming when you get this call and the accreditation's happening, however it goes down, I don't know if they call you or what happens, but what was that like? Because that's you, your team, so many individuals involved in that to get something that probably they didn't think was going to happen for a long time, right? Whether that's the media, whether that's people in the community. What was that like, the process? But lead with, if you can, what that phone call or however they told you, what that was like when you got the news.
Yeah, when the state commissioner called me and invited me to come to a meeting in Jefferson City as they were going to be voting on accreditation, I had obviously an inkling that you don't bring things to the table to vote on unless you know they're going to pass. And I got enough intel to believe that that was going to occur. So the phone call was anticlimactic to actually showing up and being in the audience when that occurred. Back in the city of St. Louis, televisions were on in classrooms for kids to see, for teachers to see. And, frankly, for me, it was about saying that a district like St. Louis with high poverty, 89% African-American population could achieve. It was about saying that, yes, a district that everybody had given up on, kids that everybody had given up on, maybe not everybody, but a number of persons had given up on, that they can actually meet the standard that all 520 some other districts in the state could meet. And so it was less about me and more about them, if you can understand what I'm saying. It was about the faculty, it was about parents, it was about kids who really dug themselves out of a hole over a 11-year period of time, making incremental steps. We didn't go from 0 to 100 overnight. It didn't happen. Nothing happens that way. It's a process over time. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 1 step back. It was a give and take back and forth over a period of time. And I just wanted the city of St. Louis to be proud of the kids in the St. Louis Public School District. At the end of the day, that's what it was about. I wanted the kids to be that way. I wanted the families to feel that way. And at the end of the day, that was it. Nothing else. It was about, it was really about them feeling proud of who they were, that they can meet those standards.
Yeah, that's great. And you talk about the process. I mean, it didn't happen overnight, just like to go from a deficit, right, to positive didn't happen overnight. Don't you? I think a lot of people just want that thing to happen overnight, right? And that's the problem, because what happens is you got to trust the process, and it's going to take years. So how did you trust it and know that it may take 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 years to get there, but you knew you were going to get there?
So I'm a data person. I look at numbers like crazy. And so I simply plotted out from a data perspective. When I arrived as a superintendent, obviously numbers were all over the place. I created a data wall. And on that data wall, I had the indicators, the 12 or 13 indicators that were most important, school by school. And on a weekly, monthly basis, we would discuss that in my leadership meeting. We would discuss if attendance was at, our graduation rate was at 50, and the next year was at 55. What did we need to do, school by school, kid by kid? So I knew what a school needed to do. I knew what kids were close to graduating, what kids were not close to graduating, and what they needed to do. And I held principals accountable for that. So when you came to a meeting with me, I needed to know that Brett was here and now he's here. I need to know that he needed 3 more credits. And what did he need to get to those 3 more credits? He needed to go to summer school. He needed to do this. He needed to take an extra course to do that. And so that's the level of the granularity of what we did to move the needle. It wasn't you wake up one morning and Brett is going to graduate. That's not going to happen. No. What do I need to do? Do I need to go pick him up? Does a social worker need to check on him? Yes, we do. We need to check on him and see where he is. So we did those kinds of things on a school by school, teacher by teacher basis for 11 years. We looked at every single number And I held my team accountable for it. They would come to meetings on a regular basis with the superintendent, and we would go through all of the data. They know they had those kind of check-ins with me, and if the needle wasn't moving, I'll go, okay, what do we need to do? What kind of support does this person need? Let's give them the support they need. If they can't get it, we'll get somebody else in there to do it. Kids' lives are too important that we can't waste that time doing that. So I'm a data person. And so year by year, week by week, month by month, I'm looking at data. I'm looking at numbers.
Strong. That is strong. Well, I can say on behalf of the people in St. Louis, man, they were grateful for you, and thanks for all the work you've done. It's incredible what you've done and continue to do through the Community Foundation. And is there anything I should ask him that maybe I didn't ask or I don't know about? I'm going to put you on the spot here. No? We've nailed it. Well, that means we nailed it.
Yeah, you nailed it. You did.
Well, we'll put everything in the show notes, and it'll be down here, the links where they can find you. That's another question. Where can people find you?
Where can people find me, ladies?
STLgives.org. And you guys are behind the STL Gives Day.
Yes, we didn't even talk about that.
So let's talk about that.
Yes.
Talk about that.
So the Community Foundation is focused on supporting nonprofits in the community. One of the ways that they've done that over the last 11 years is the St. Louis Gives. Give St. Louis. I'm sorry.
Give STL Day.
I always mess it up. Gives STL Day. And so we have a tremendous number of donors who have participated with giving back to nonprofits in our region, and it's made a difference for those nonprofits moving from point A to point B. As I said before, $30 million over the last 11 years has been raised targeting just our nonprofits, despite the other kinds of things we do as well. The $100 million I'm talking about, that's separate and apart from what is happening in that space. So it's just a commitment that we have to nonprofits to support them, to build capacity for them, and also to kind of put them on a map with our donors, because sometimes donors don't know who to give resources to, and this pushes them in the middle of the room and say, hey, look at me. We're doing this, we're doing that. Fantastic opportunity for our donors to think strategically about who to support and how to support them.
Well, my man, you have a big heart and a kind person, and it's amazing to have people like you at the leadership of these amazing organizations. So thank you for what you're doing
Thanks for the invitation.
City of St. Louis, and thanks for being on the Circuit of Success.
Thank you very much.